All right, this one's not going to be fun. I've been dreading it. It is something that when you're in my position, because of personal relationships you make, you always hate when you get that internal sense that something like this might take place, and then when it does, it is a massive gut punch. But I wanted to discuss it because, well, it's extremely notable. It is certainly it's effectual to the future and the alteration of the FAU football program, but also because from a human standpoint, it obviously makes an impact, and so it is certainly worthy of discussing on a multitude of levels. Roc Bellantoni, FAU defensive coordinator, Florida Atlantic offensive line coach Ed Warriner, both let go, dismissed, and no longer within the FAU football coaching staff. This is the Inside Florida Atlantic podcast, Florida Atlantic voice. I am the voice of FAU, Ken LaVicka, and this is where, well, we discuss FAU football, FAU basketball, whether it's good, whether it's mediocre, whether it's poor. We talk about it. And again, a reminder: I don't say anything on this podcast that I have not, would not, or will not say on game broadcasts on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network. Just something unique for you, the FAU fan. We're presented by Robes Law Group. Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. In the community for you, office is Delray Beach. It's Robes Law Group. And life tackles you hard, call Robes Law Group, your campus accident attorneys, at 561-570-5700, or visit robeslawgroup.com. That's Robes Law Group. So Roc Bellantoni, defensive coordinator, dismissed. Let's start there. With 3 games left to go in this 2024 season, in his second stint as FAU defensive coordinator. Before we talk about the football part of this, I want to get to the life part of this. Roc Bellantoni is as exemplary a human being as has ever existed within the FAU football program, both as a leader, as a mentor, as a teacher, as a representative, as a friend. He as someone that you can confide in. He is an all-world person. And I think it's easy in times like this just to fall back on that because you're melancholy, you're in remembrance mode. And again, Roc hasn't passed, okay? And he's going to find another job, and he's going to succeed somewhere. He's going to land like he always does in an ideal situation because, well, he earns it, and because he's that good of a coach and that good of a person. So I don't want people to think that I'm basically giving a post-mortem, literally, on Roc Bellantoni. This is not a eulogy, but since he's no longer within the program, and since I'm not sure the next time is that any of us are going to see him, I'm going to see him. I just think that for those who haven't been around the program as long, have never actually met Roc, don't know much about Roc Bellantoni, understand as someone who has been within this program for 2 different phases of Roc Bellantoni's career, first under Charlie Partridge and now under Tom Herman. Outside of the football realm, he's just a fine man. Like that simple. Easy to approach, easy to talk to, easy to joke with, easy to be told the straight observations, the straight facts. He doesn't mince words. I love the fact that a couple of weeks ago, I was, hey, man, that's that interception for Jackson Ambush. That was pretty big. Yeah. But he could be playing better. Roc never minced words. And so from a true, just gentleman, professional, a feature face of the university, certainly a loss with Tom Herman making the decision that Roc Bellantoni was no longer going to be the defensive coordinator. As for Ed Warriner, someone who coached the O-line through 2 different coaching staffs, Willie Taggart into Tom Herman. He knew Tom Herman for an awful long time, and as Tom Herman put it in fact, let's read what Tom Herman said in the press release that was put out after the decision had been made for Roc Bellantoni and Ed Warriner to depart the program. Quote, this is Tom Herman, quote, "I have the utmost respect for Roc, and I want to thank him for his multiple stints at Florida Atlantic, but in order to move our program forward and create a new identity on defense, a change was needed." End quote. This is Tom Herman on Ed Warriner, long-time coaching partner, long-time college football relationship. Quote, "When Ed and I met," and I think Tom Herman is talking about on Sunday or even Saturday with the game on Thursday or even Friday. "When Ed and I met, he expressed his interest in pursuing other opportunities at the end of the year. We felt mutually it was best to go ahead and start that process now. I appreciate Ed and his contributions to our program and wish him all the best." Ed Warriner was certainly a tough coach, like Roc, a great representative to the university, brought a lot of cachet to the program, a man who's won a national championship at Ohio State, a man who's been a part of a lot of successful programs and offensive fronts, and has coached incredible amount of professionals at the college level and helped elevate them to making NFL money along that offensive line. So Ed Warriner, really outstanding to get to know him over the last several years. His wife, who was on several road trips over the last 3-4 years or so. And so Ed Warriner was a benefit. He was a gift to the FAU football program. And so for someone that has been coaching that position group for as long as Ed Warriner has, there's definitely going to be a transition, and it's going to be a bit of a reset button. I think probably more so than the defense as a whole with Roc Bellantoni's departure. One thing I want to acknowledge, and if I don't acknowledge this, then I'm completely fraudulent, and it goes against everything that I have ever stood for when it comes to my relationship with the FAU football fan base. I'm not going to ignore it. I understand that a lot of you are upset, especially with the decision to sack Roc Bellantoni. I get that it is upsetting, especially because, as many of you point out, for the vast majority of 2024, the offense has really struggled. It has sputtered along. It has had its issues, and there's a reason that Tom Herman made the decision to jump in and start calling plays, because the offensive side of the ball was in a rough way. It was in a below average way based on Tom Herman's standards, and the numbers were tangible. They bore that out. So Tom Herman already this season has made a significant decision on offense, and that was him taking the offensive play calling duties from offensive coordinator Charlie Frye. I am not going to be one to call for terminations, because these people, not only do I work alongside them, but they are my friends. And so I would never, ever, 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 ever advocate for anything like that. I'm simply trying to point out for the fans that, well, what about the offensive side of the ball? Well, a major decision was already made this year on the offensive side of the ball at about the midway point of the season. Okay. You can't forget that. That can't just be brushed aside. All right. And I get, in a frustrating season like this one, 2-7, no longer bowl eligible. It's truly evaluation mode from here on out. And it's tough to stomach that it's evaluation mode for 3 whole games. I understand that. And I get the gnashing of teeth and the desire for bloodletting and however you want to put it. But I don't know anything about anything when it comes to any future moves. I don't know what Tom Herman's process is going to be. I don't know what his mindset is going to be. But the what about, I'm not going to play the what about game. I'm not going to do it. What happened. I'm going to discuss that. I'm not going to speculate any further. I'm certainly not going to entertain any questions or advisements about who else should have their future within this program question. I am not doing that to friends and counterparts. Okay? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What I can do potentially is give you a little insight into why Tom Herman decided to make a change on defense. For the offensive line, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And Tom Herman saying that Ed Warriner had already expressed a desire to look outside the confines of the FAU football program. What are you going to do about that? Like, Ed Warriner wanted to take another step in his career, wanted to potentially go to another opportunity. That's well within his right. He put his time in at FAU. And so far be it from Tom Herman to keep him, someone who's known for a long time, from going that route. I think statistically, tangibly, FAU allowing 27 sacks this year along the offensive front that had 4 new starters amongst those 5. A lot of rotation and nothing really seemed to gel, though the running game started to come around a little bit. C.J. Campbell, Jabari Mobley, both in the top 10 in AAC rushing, currently set 5th in the conference full season in rushing yards. That started to come together, but the passing game never truly did. And up until a couple of weeks ago, this was on pace to be the worst modern-day FAU passing game. They've created some distance between themselves and the 2011 side, but they are still in that neighborhood of being in that 2011 discussion, that 1-11 season with that passing offense. They've made some headway, though. There's been some improvement, but the 27 sacks allowed, that's tied for 3rd most in the American. It's just not going to get the job done. And there were issues along the offensive line. We remember Cam Fancher just getting his brains beaten in against Michigan State. It just never seemed to come together. That is potentially a contributing factor to all of that as well. Okay? As well. Again, I haven't talked through any of this yet with Tom Herman. Florida Atlantic Coaches Show coming up Wednesday. Duffy's on St. Andrews. I'll talk with Tom Herman and Charlie Fry during that show. So it starts at noon. I would come out there, have your lunch, and we'll discuss it with Tom Herman. You want answers? I'll do my best with a consummate professional in Tom Herman to make sure that he has posed the proper questions in order to give you the answers that you seek with these decisions that have been made in the wake of the ugly loss at East Carolina. Now, for the defensive side of the ball, I know because Roc is held near and dear to many fans' hearts, and because the defense certainly sort of carried this thing through a large portion of 2024, was really proficient at forcing turnovers, keeping FAU in ball games, being real stubborn, real stingy, very similar to the identity, and we'll get to identity in a second, the identity of last year's Florida Atlantic defense. I think for some, it's shocking that Roc Bellantoni would be told to exit this FAU football program. And I totally understand that. I completely understand that. I just wanted to, within this podcast, maybe, and again, I am, at this moment, I'm not mouthpiecing for Tom Herman because he hasn't told me anything to mouthpiece for him, okay? What I'm doing is perhaps giving a little bit of context into the decision that was made by Tom Herman to go another direction on defense with his defensive coordinator, okay? I want to base it off of this quote that Tom Herman gave in the press release announcing the departure of Roc Bellantoni and Ed Warriner. This is specifically about Roc Bellantoni. Quote, "I have the utmost respect for Roc, and I want to thank him for his multiple stints at Florida Atlantic. But in order to move our program forward and create a new identity on defense, a change was needed." Let me read that one more time, and I want you to pay special attention to the last part. I have the utmost respect for Roc, and I want to thank him for his multiple stints at Florida Atlantic. But in order to move our program forward and create a new identity on defense, a change was needed. End quote. That last part. Create a new identity on defense. Create a new identity on defense. And I started asking myself, well, what is currently the identity on FAU's defense? Through the first 7 games or so of the season, I think that Florida Atlantic's defense, the identity was, we'll give up yards, but we'll come up with a timely turnover or 2 or 3. I think that was the defense, the identity of the defense. Would more often than not bow up in the red zone and keep the offense in games. That to me was the identity of the defense. But it has not been the same in the last 4 games, really starting with the fourth quarter against North Texas, where North Texas basically did whatever it wanted against FAU, especially through the air. And then I think the loss at UTSA, the 2 Jaden Williams interceptions and the scoop and score from Wendell Fullord, it masked a lot of issues that FAU was having, giving up big plays. And then that really came to light second half against USF, and then hit FAU and FAU fans square in the face right off the bat, right at the jump at East Carolina. The identity of this FAU football defense was give up some points, stay stubborn, come up with timely turnovers in the first 7 games of the year. I said first 7 games, 2 and 7. Nah, more like the first 6 games of the year. Okay? First 5.5, 6 games of the year. We'll go ahead and average it out there. Okay? Sorry, my in-head math is struggling right now. First 5.5, 6 games of the year, give up yards, some points, but stubborn, keep offense in games, come up with timely turnovers. That was the identity of the FAU defense. Over the last 4 games, 3.5, 4 games, that identity has changed. And this is where I think Tom Herman's coming from in that specific quote that we're focused on. Create a new identity on defense. That's Tom Herman's words. Create a new identity on defense. And here's what I'm talking about. Florida Atlantic's defense, let's compare the big defensive categories from this year at this point with 3 games left to go with last year, when I think we would all agree that Florida Atlantic and an untested defense was a significant surprise all season long for FAU. And the numbers bore it out that they were a real strong defense, okay? But I think as you're about to see, there have been some disturbing slides in production when it comes to where Florida Atlantic sits within the National College Football realm. Total defense. In 2023, Florida Atlantic was 8th in overall games in the American and 8th in conference games in total defense. In 2024, Florida Atlantic is 11th in total defense amongst American Athletic Conference teams and 13th, second to last in conference games, total defense. You go from 8th to 13th in conference games in a year span, total defense. A slide of 5, that's a couple of games that are decided by that in the wrong direction, okay? Scoring defense, which is where Florida Atlantic really hung in last year and became extremely formidable in the grand scheme of things. FAU last year, 6th in scoring defense in the American. If you just count the conference games, the Owls were 7th in scoring defense. This year, 2024, FAU 8th in scoring defense in the American. But when we're talking the 5 conference games, Florida Atlantic sits 11th in scoring defense. From a 7th to 11th in conference games in scoring defense in a calendar year. Again, we're talking identity of the defense. Run defense. This has been the most profound drop on that side of the ball. Florida Atlantic last year, 7th against the run of all American Athletic Conference teams, 6th in conference games. So really, in conference play, he grinded out some outstanding run defense results there than they did season as a whole. But in 2024, FAU goes from 7th to 12th in run defense in the American. And in conference play only, FAU goes from 6th to 12th, third to last in the conference in rush defense. That's a sizable slide. That is problematic, as you can see. Pass defense. This is where the only improvement has really come for Florida Atlantic. FAU was 11th in pass defense last year. All games in the American Athletic Conference. This year, they're 6th. But keep in mind, Florida Atlantic, going back 3 games ago, was tops in pass defense in the American. They've slid from 1st to 6th in 3 games. Okay? That's a sizable drop to suffer in 3 games. FAU's pass defense, well, it's improved, up 5 from a year ago. Within the American Athletic Conference, it has dropped 5 spots in 3 games. And then in conference games only, 9th last year, 9th this year. So the identity of the FAU defense, to me, you start to have the discussion of, especially lately, there has been a significant, not a small, but a significant decline in production from the defense from 2023 to 2024. If we're going by Tom Herman's words and we're talking identity, okay? Also, Florida Atlantic appears to be well on pace to have its least number of sacks in a single season in over a decade, 12 years, in fact. Florida Atlantic has 11 sacks so far this year in 9 games. 11 sacks in 9 games, just barely over a sack a game. Florida Atlantic had 12 sacks in 2012. Okay? So maybe based on how FAU has shown all year long their ability to get the quarterback to the ground with the football, you're looking at 14 sacks. That's going to be the fewest since the 12 in 2012. That has not been good enough. Okay? And then here is where I think the identity really kicks in. If we're using that I word, if we're truly going to go in on what the defensive identity is, why Tom Herman may have made the decision he did and then said what he did after he made the move at defensive coordinator, I want you to look at big plays allowed, okay? Big plays allowed. Florida Atlantic is tied for 102nd in the nation in 20-plus yard plays allowed. 102nd in the nation, okay? Keep in mind, there's 134 teams in FBS. FAU is 102nd in 20-plus yard plays allowed. That's a lot. But how about this? Florida Atlantic in 40-plus yard plays allowed. Huge chunk plays, touchdowns, massive field-turning plays against them. Florida Atlantic is 122nd in the nation of 134 teams in plays allowed 40 or more yards. That's down 80 spots from a year ago. 80 spots from last year. Florida Atlantic was sensational in that category, all things considered, last year. Top 50 in the country, 42nd in the nation. This year, 122nd in the country in 40-plus yard pass plays allowed. That's a problem. That's happened too many times for it not to be an identity. And then, here's this. Florida Atlantic, there are only 3 teams in all of college football that have given up more 30-plus yard pass plays than Florida Atlantic. FAU is tied for 129th in the country in 30-plus yard pass plays allowed. That's down 67 from a year ago. This is profound stuff. This is game-changing, season-changing stuff right there. So I obviously never want to see anybody let go and jettisoned from the FAU football family. You have told me in no uncertain words, terms, how upset you are with the change of defensive coordinator. All I'm trying to do is give a little context based on Tom Herman's words: identity on defense, identity on defense, identity on defense, about what he believes now is the identity on defense and why it needs to change. And then identity on defense is that this defense gives up a lot of big plays, and the numbers bear that out. That's inarguable. It's undebatable. The numbers prove that FAU is one of the most porous defenses when it comes to big plays allowed in the entire United States of America. 102nd, 20 or more yard pass plays allowed. 122nd, 40 or more yard pass plays allowed. 129th of 134 in 30 or more yard pass plays allowed. That, unfortunately, is the identity of the defense, and that needs to be curbed, or Florida Atlantic is not going to be in a position to compete for championships or compete for a spot in the postseason. Okay? So all I'm trying to, I'm as sick about all of this as anybody, and as blah about the outcome of the season as anybody. All I'm trying to do is give you a little bit of a look into why Tom Herman made the ultimate decision that he did. One, he's the boss. He can do it. And two, those numbers, I think, tell a story about, as Tom Herman put it, the identity of this FAU defense and how things have regressed from one year to another. All right. Another reminder that Florida Atlantic Coaches Show Wednesday. It'll air Thursday on Fox Sports 640. But if you want to be there, hear it. Wednesday, Tom Herman will be there. Charlie Fry will be there. Head coach, offensive coordinator, Duffy, St. Andrews, Boca Raton at noon. You want some answers? You want to feel invested in the program? I would encourage you to be there. I'll be there with Coach and Charlie Fry. And so I would encourage you to be there as well. Okay? So that's what I wanted to say about the departure of Roc Bellantoni and Ed Warriner. I think Brandon Harris is going to be awesome in his interim role as defensive coordinator. Cannot wait to see what sort of new wrinkles there might be. Kyle Chung, I can't wait to see what he does with the offensive line and how he coaches them up. Jordan Helm, I called his games as a player at FAU, and now he's the interim linebackers coach. I'm super proud of him. He has come a long way as a player and now is getting a real great opportunity as a coach. And so I feel great for him as someone who has come up under this FAU football umbrella, someone who has come through this whole thing internally. It's a great opportunity. It is sad that it comes at the expense of Roc Bellantoni and Ed Warriner departing. However, unfortunately, this is the business of college football, and I am not ignorant to the fact that these things happen, and it's not our first go-around at Florida Atlantic with these types of decisions being made. Florida Atlantic at Temple on Saturday afternoon. That'll be a 2 o'clock kickoff. FAU basketball, we'll have a recap of that here on the Florida Atlantic Voice. Their trip to UCF on Tuesday, I'll be there, and then we'll get some insight after the fact. Don't forget to subscribe to the Florida Atlantic Voice wherever you get your podcast. Just have it come right to your phone, super easy, and then you press play, you listen, you enjoy it, or you don't like it. But the most important thing is you give it a listen. But again, I appreciate you listening. Tell your friends, tell fellow FAU fans in your life as well. And the Florida Atlantic Voice presented by Robes Law Group. In the game of life, accidents are the penalties no one plans for. Robes Law Group, your campus accident attorneys, they're going to help you bounce back. Call 561-570-5700. That's 561-570-5700 to go to Robes Law Group. ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. That's Robes Law Group, presenting sponsor of the Florida Atlantic Voice. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of it. And we'll talk to you next time. I'm Ken LaVicka. This has been the Florida Atlantic Voice, wherever you get your podcasts. Bye-bye.